Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen is my co-host Joe Clark, as always. And it was a rough one for the Steelers this past week. One of the worst feeling games I've watched of the Steelers in quite some time. Maybe there's a little recency bias there, but man, there's a lot of bad stats and dubious stats for the Steelers that we'll dive into. We're going to talk about all of that. Recapping the Eagles game, we're going to talk about some of the injury news, of which, unfortunately, there are many injuries to talk about, and then we'll dive into the upcoming Ravens game, and how important that is for this Steelers team. Before we dive in, Joe, anything going on in your world? You doing all right?
Yeah, no, doing well, doing well. How about you?
Yeah, it's just chugging along. We're in the middle of this crazy 11-day stretch. It feels crazy for us, and we're just writing about the team. I can only imagine if you are actually having to play those 3 games in 11 days, and they are in the middle of that right now. They got that game coming up on Saturday, and then again on Wednesday, and all 3 against playoff quality, Super Bowl quality opponents. I would not be surprised if 1 or even 2 teams from this 3-game stretch end up in the Super Bowl. Would not surprise me one bit, and I think we saw that with the Eagles. The Steelers lost 27-13, and the score did not tell the story. Where do we want to start here? Because there were opportunities for the Steelers to win this game. Maybe not win, but there were some opportunities for them to kind of steal it, or maybe kind of eke out a victory or get close. We'll talk about why that didn't ultimately happen, but the score could have been worse because the Eagles finished the game with a 10-minute and 31 or 32, something around there, second drive, and basically could have scored again. So we're talking this could have been a 3-touchdown blowout, but the Eagles chose to kneel it out instead of punching it in for another touchdown. And so it did end up being a blowout, but the Steelers did have their opportunities. Joe, where do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I think you just kind of got to start from the top with just how bad the Steelers offense looked through the first quarter and a half. They didn't have a first down until midway through the second quarter. There's just no rhythm, no flow. Russell Wilson, I think, started the game 2 of 7, 2 of 8 with like 1 yard. It was just all around. It was just really ugly on the offensive side. You clearly saw George Pickens felt his absence, and then the run game just couldn't get going against the Eagles' big men up front: Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams. Those are 3 really, really good interior defensive linemen that kind of ruined just anything the Steelers tried to do up the middle offensively. I mean, the Steelers' game plan wasn't good at all offensively. They got some points late, but it just wasn't the start of the game really told you the story of how it was going to go. I mean, they had the 2 turnovers, really didn't capitalize, only just the 3 points off the field goal from the punt on Cooper DeJean. So if you're not going to jump on this Eagles team early, especially with how good they are, you don't really stand much of a chance. And the Steelers certainly did not jump on them early. And eventually the Eagles just wore them down and were able to pull away with, a pretty easy victory. I don't think it's really, a defining loss for the Steelers, but it was definitely a tough start and not a start that really they can afford to replicate in these next few games.
Yeah, I mean, their only chance to sneak out a victory, given how pretty much they were manhandled on both sides of the ball, was to win the turnover battle, and they technically did win the turnover battle. But if you look at the turnover plus explosive plays, which kind of tells a little bit more context to that, the Eagles just had so many explosive plays. It was like almost every other play on offense. They were just getting chunks, 20 yards, 21 yards, 22 yards. They were just constantly ripping off explosive plays. And so the Steelers were winning in the turnover battle 2-0, like you just mentioned there. And then, of course, Najee Harris picked the worst possible time to have a rare fumble. It was a routine toss play. He just dropped it, basically, lost focus. He was looking at the hole before securing the football, and that kind of fumbled away any semblance of momentum that the Steelers were starting to kind of build. They had that trick play that for a second made you think, okay, well, they're marching down the field. They were only down by a score at that point. So if you score a touchdown, this was early in the second half, it's a tie ball game, and then that's the kind of game that the Steelers tend to find a way to win if they can enter that fourth quarter around roughly a tie. Najee Harris fumbled. They marched down. I think it was 13 or 14 plays, or a bunch of plays, maybe even more than that. A lot of plays they marched down and they scored. The Steelers only got three points off their 2 turnovers. The Eagles got 7 off of their 1, and that ended up kind of being one of the big differences in this game. I did want to talk about time of possession because it was a historically bad performance for the Steelers. They only had 20 minutes and 8 seconds time of possession. Entering the game this week, they were actually number 1 in the NFL in terms of average time of possession per game. I believe they were averaging like 32-29 per game they were averaging. And they just put up 20 and 8 seconds. That is the 6th worst performance that they've had since it started being tracked as a statistic in 1983. And it is the worst that they've had in over 20 years. The last time they had one that bad was 2003, Steelers versus the Rams. And so not a great sign for the Steelers. You say it's not a defining loss, but it does worry me to some extent because if you look at the other Steelers teams that this happened to, not that great of teams. One of them did make the playoffs, but they exited in the first round. The Steelers are supposed to be a team that controls the clock. That's how they win, and they just got absolutely handled in that department by the Eagles. Now this is maybe the best team in football right now, so you got to take that into account, but concerning nevertheless. Let's talk about some of the questionable calls in here because there were a couple. If you want to start with whichever one you want to start with, Joe.
Yeah, I think the scuffle, the fact that the penalties weren't offsetting is just it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, fine, you don't see the punch, but you see 2 guys going at each other after the play, like pushing and shoving, whatever. Usually they're just automatic. All right, fine, we'll get offsetting, reset. Steelers, fine, we'll get the ball first down, the 11. Like, fine. Like, no problems there. But then they get Calvin Austin for coming in after. Like, what did he do that was any worse than, like, what Slay was doing, pushing and shoving? What Quinion did coming in after the play to push and shove? I don't really understand how you look at, like, the totality of just the pushing and shoving. It's like, yeah, we're going to get Darnell Washington and Calvin Austin on this and nobody on Philadelphia. Like, it's baffling. Like, I don't know. Not to like publicly call a guy out, but like Alan Eck might need to get his eyes checked because he called the phantom offsides against Isaac Seumalo against the Jaguars last season too. Which like you watch that play back and it's like, yeah, I don't know how anybody could have thought that Isaac Seumalo did anything weird on that play that weren't getting flagged. You watch that play back, I don't know how you look at anything Philadelphia did. It's like, yeah, no, they're just good choir boys out there pushing and shoving back and forth against the wall. So that one really annoyed me because the play the Steelers got down to the 4, fine, but even if you don't cost them 15 yards there, so then you have what was it, or it was 2nd and goal at like the 18 or whatever, something or 19, something stupid like that because of the 15-yard after the dump off to Najee, and that's a prime opportunity to score and jump on the Eagles early in the game. And then they have to settle for a field goal because they have a long field. The Eagles can sit back and just basically cover the goal line. So that one really, to me, was the most egregious call of the game, and one that I don't think it cost the Steelers the game. The Steelers did not play well at all. They missed a ton of tackles, but that's one where you look at it, it's like if that went the other way or if that just wasn't, if that was offsetting, then maybe the Steelers do find the end zone there and the game, the tide momentum, I don't know, turns a little bit. So that's the one that really got under my skin.
Yeah, no doubt. 90% of the time in those scuffles, you're getting offsetting penalties. And I heard Gene Steratore this morning's like the NFL likes to, they like to avoid the offsetting because then it's like, fair game in those scuffles. Players feel like, oh, well, why not get a punch in if it's just going to be offsetting anyways? And so I get that, but just based on all of the scuffles I've ever seen, offsetting tends to happen. And Slay said it himself. It felt like a hockey fight in there. And I think his podcast he just posted, he, pretty much said like he was getting his punches in and he basically reinforcing the fact that he even felt like something was going to happen in terms of penalty or offsetting, or I think he even mentioned ejections being possible at one point. So and it's just baffling how the ref can be right there and how replay assist can be involved. Replay assist seemingly makes absolutely no sense. to me ever. When they choose to actually do something versus when they don't, and the conclusions they come to are often pretty baffling. Zach Frazier got called for tripping, which was just like completely wild to me because he was literally just falling to the ground and somebody tripped over his legs. It didn't really look like he was angling his legs in any which way to cause a trip. Did you get that sense? Did you think he was going for a trip?
Yeah, no, I didn't really get that sense at all. That was another one that was just kind of a little bit confusing. And it's also a play you don't really see called all that often. So for them to call it there in that spot is one that I didn't really understand. But I mean, one of many calls. I mean, even you talk about the Connor Hayward getting slapped in the head, and it was clear during the punt. You could hear during the audio, you could hear the head slap, and then they enforced it after the punt. And I mean, the Steelers would have had a first down if they had gotten the ball in that if they had forced it on the punt and not after the play. And then that was on set up the Eagles, ridiculous, monstrous 10-plus minute drive to win the game. So that's another one that you look at. It was just there's a lot of bad calls, and again, the calls didn't cost the Steelers the game. The 20 something missed tackles and inability to get off the field in third and long and inability to start fast cost them the game. But the officiating surely did not help matters.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much sums up the game. A couple missed opportunities. The Steelers could have potentially snuck a victory, but they didn't deserve it at all. And so we take that and move on. I think probably pretty much puts a bow on that game. If the Steelers play the Eagles, it will be in the Super Bowl, and I guess this time hopefully they'd have Pickens and DeShon Elliott. I don't know how much of a difference it would have made, but Pickens seems to make a huge difference when he's on the field. The Steelers have been pretty rough the last 2 weeks without him, and we sure hope he's available for the Ravens, which segues us to the injuries. There was quite a few injuries because the fact that the Steelers had 77 snaps on defense in this game. The defense, some of the players were kind of dropping like flies. They already entered the game with a couple of injuries. Like I said, DeShon Elliott, Larry Ogunjobi out for the game on defense, and TJ Watt joined them, as well as Donte Jackson. So 4 starters that basically could potentially miss this very important Ravens game. Now, Mike Tomlin expressed, I guess, some optimism for TJ Watt. It's a low ankle sprain, and so it's not. It looked to me at first, I was pretty worried because it kind of looked like a non-contact, like, oh boy, what just happened, like to his foot. I know that Twitter doctor, whatever that guy's name is, was sowing some pretty big doom at the time. Didn't end up being that bad, so that's good, but. We'll see if Watt's available. What else was on the injury front today, Joe?
Yeah, Justin Fields, who must have hurt he had one carry against the Eagles. He got popped pretty good, got a 15-yard penalty drawn. Must have hurt his abdomen because he was listed as questionable. Like that play happened, I think, early second quarter, something like that. That was listed as questionable, like midway through the third. Didn't return to the game. Pickens, obviously, we talked about. He's got the hammy. Cam Hayward had a rest day. Patrick Queen had a rest day, and then some good news there. Joby didn't practice all last week with his groin injury. He did return limited today, although it was like to note it was a walkthrough. So tomorrow will really be the day to see where guys are, and then Elliott with the hamstring. So the only guy that really, I guess, lost in the Eagles game would be Watt, which is obviously and Donte Jackson. I'm sorry, I forgot about him. He hurt his back, but Donte Jackson gets hurt, I think, every single week and has yet to actually miss a game. So we'll see. We'll see what his status is for this week. But yeah, Watt's obviously a huge, huge loss if he can't go against Baltimore. But I mean, Tomlin is optimistic, and it seems like he's got. It said it's a low ankle, not a high ankle, which is the same thing that Alex Highsmith had. But Highsmith, I believe, was in a boot after the game. Watt wasn't on a boot. He talked to the media. Tomlin said he was walking around comfortably today. Report, I think Brooke Pryor tweeted he was walking around without an obvious brace on his foot. And Tomlin reiterated yesterday, the Steelers can clinch a division title if they win, that all who are healthy will play. There will be no, let's not turn a small problem into a big problem, as he said a few times, earlier this season. He's like, no, all who are healthy will play. We want to win the division. So if Watt can go, Watt will go. Maybe not in his full suite of snaps, but if he's healthy enough to be on the field, in some capacity. And as there was, Dr. Mel pointed out, there was 2021 get a low ankle and return the next week. So there's a precedent for him to come back. Obviously, it is a short week, but I do actually feel, just off the reporting coming out from what Tomlin said, I feel fairly confident that Watt will be able to go on Saturday. Everybody else, I think we'll kind of have to see where they're at tomorrow.
Yeah, what? Highsmith missed like 3 games or something, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's not going to happen with Watt. I mean, even Highsmith's injury, his ankle was like a 90-degree. Like, he rolled it horribly. Watt's, I mean, looking back at the video, I can't even barely tell what happened to Watt. So it's just like a minor roll for him. And so would not be surprised at all if he plays. And they are definitely going to need him because they don't want to be without their best player on both sides of the ball. TJ Watt, their best overall player, and Pickens, probably their best offensive player, maybe other than Russell Wilson. But yeah, I mean, the defense in general, I'm a little worried about because that 77 plays that they just logged does not bode well. The Ravens are kind of a similar team. They can control the clock, and they can control, the pace of the game with some long drives. They can string together some long drives. They're going to be dealing with a mobile quarterback. Man, if the Ravens put up another 50-plus play game on offense, or 55-plus play game on offense, this defense is going to be absolutely gassed going into that Chiefs game. Which, the Chiefs might be without Patrick Mahomes, so everybody's kind of going through this stretch together. The Ravens, the Chiefs, the Steelers, all are in this 3-game and 11-day program that's going on right now, so it's not like it's unfair. All the teams are dealing with it, but it is something to look at nevertheless. George Pickens, Joe, do you think he'll be back this week?
He looked pretty good from the clips we saw from practice of him working off to the side. But then again, he was working off to the side and not in individual drills, but he was doing ladder work, some jogging. So, I mean, might change my tune from last week, just given that he didn't really look like he was impeded all that much when he was going through the ladder, which obviously, you can't really glean a ton from that. But given the nature of the injury, I guess I think there's a chance tomorrow will be pretty telling if he's back in even a limited capacity tomorrow. If he logs another DNP tomorrow, then I think it'll be tough to get him on the field for Saturday. But I think at this point I wouldn't be completely surprised if he was out there, especially because of what Tomlin said about all who are healthy will play and just how bad the offense looked to start the game. I think even having him in there for, I don't know, 15, 20 snaps will be a boost for this offense. And in a game that they can clinch the AFC North, you might as well give it a go.
Yeah, based on Dr. Melanie Friedlander's Doctors In article that she put out, which is fantastic. All of you should go read it. A grade 2, typically 95% of players will return within 1.32 games to 2.16 games. Obviously, his injury happened late in the week on Thursday before that Browns game. So, this Thursday will be 2 full weeks since the injury occurred. And so he's very well within the range of possibilities and the range of likely possibilities of actually playing. Obviously, 2.16 games is kind of the upper range of that confidence interval that Melanie had there. So it is possible he misses, but I would think, we talked about it last week. It would be difficult to get him up to speed for the Chiefs, but if the Steelers end up losing to this Ravens game and, Pickens is healthy enough to play, they're going to get him in there against the Chiefs. And I wouldn't be surprised if they get him in there this week just because of how much this game means. And that segues us to the final topic here, talking about the Ravens, previewing that game just a little bit. If the Steelers win, they do win the AFC North. If they lose, I believe that chance falls to about 55%. They still have the inside track because I believe they have a 2-game lead in the conference over the Ravens at the moment. Obviously, if they lose, that would be cut to a 1-game lead in the conference. And at that point, I think as long as the Steelers beat the Bengals in the final week, and as long as it's not a situation where, obviously the Steelers and Ravens would have to end with the same record for the tiebreakers to come into play. But if they do end with the same record and it goes to tiebreakers, chances are pretty good that the Steelers are the ones who walk into the playoffs as the AFC North champions, host the playoff game for the first time since 2020. Where do you want to start here in terms of this Ravens preview, Joe?
Yeah, I think just kind of Mike Tomlin gleaned on in this press conference. We talked about last time they played the Ravens. It was Ravens have the 32 range pass defense. Obviously, the game didn't play out. The Steelers didn't bomb the ball over the field. It was a kind of a classic old school Steelers Ravens game. But Tomlin talked about how the defense looks different. The Ravens added Dean Pease as a senior advisor earlier this season. And Tomlin said now you can kind of really see the full brunt of those changes. More than Humphrey's working full time in the slot. Kyle Hamilton's back at safety along with Darius Washington. Whereas now you have Marcus Williams on the bench. Michael Pierce is back healthy. So different units, some different schematics, and some different personnel in different spots. So a little more prep for the Steelers. Can't just go back and roll the tape from week 11 and expect to see the same Ravens team. The Ravens today kind of talked about a lot of guys mentioned in their press conferences today that they kind of feel like we don't think the Steelers are unbeatable. I mean the Steelers have won 8-9, but they're like it's a lot of what we've done against them, whether that's mental or the mental block they can't get over, whatever it is. They're not wrong. I mean, they're not 2 games ago, last year, week 5, the Ravens had a million drops. Week 18 was a game the Ravens were playing their backups. And earlier this year, I mean, you have the 2 Justin Tucker missed kicks. I don't really know how much of that is a miscue or just that's who Justin Tucker is at this point. Maybe not 2 missed kicks, but he's not, the all-world kicker that he once was. So I think that game was probably a little more even. I mean, you had the Peyton Wilson rip away from Justice Hill. I guess you call that a miscue. I just call that a good defensive play. And then other storyline to note, I would say, is just Donte Jackson, excuse from all team activities, will not play against the Steelers for a second time this season. And it looks like his Ravens career will come to an end with all of one catch, a trade that didn't give up much to get him, but really has not worked out for them. And it's going to, whatever Johnson's going through with Baltimore is going to impact his free agent market this offseason. But, I just as for the game this week, team they're familiar with, Lamar Jackson coming off another big game, but Steelers have traditionally played well against him and the Ravens, and it'll be a good classic AFC North, slugfest again at M&T Bank Stadium.
Deontay, the one catch was it negative yards? I can't. Oh no, he had 6 yards.
It
Okay.
was, but yeah, one catch for 6 yards, and then he fell down on the ball when they're trying to get a drive at the end of the half, and it was almost a Chase Claypool moment where he didn't rush up, and the rest of the offense out line of scrimmage, motioning on him to get up, and then he fell down in his route in the second half of that game, and has not had a catch since.
Yeah, we'll see what happens for him. Contract year, so a little bit rough for him to have not only a poor season, but also the kind of is it character issues? Like it seems to be character issues. I don't know what's going on. It's a lot of behind closed doors stuff going on right now. It seems like, but yeah, we'll see if the Ravens end up releasing him. Now, for those of you wondering, the Steelers aren't going to, as much as they need a receiver, I don't think they're going to dip. I mean. Here's the thing: they brought back Cam Sutton after that. That's I'm just gonna say it. It was kind of heinous what he did, and so I don't think it's completely out of the question. But I would be pretty shocked if they brought Deontay Johnson back if he does end up getting released. I think the Ravens are working hard to try and suspend him so that they don't have to expose him to that type of situation. But back to just previewing the Ravens in general. The Steelers can't rely on a Derrick Henry fumble. They can't rely on that ridiculous Peyton Wilson interception that probably would not happen if that same play was thrown 100 times. It might happen just that one time. They can't rely on Justin Tucker missing 2 field goals. And so they can't rely on winning a game with 0 touchdowns. And so if Pickens is out, if Watt's out, if DeShon Elliott's out, I mean, this game, what are you thinking, Joe? Are the Steelers kind of being set up for an ugly one?
I kind of just think the Steelers at this point just find ways to beat the Ravens. I think Mike Tomlin can just scheme ways for it to happen. I mean, even the one game the Ravens won was a game where Mason Rudolph had to have his face mask taken off from the field from a concussion, and Duck Hodges still almost led them to an overtime win if Juju Smith-Schuster didn't fumble in overtime. So that's what, like, even with, I mean, if Watt's out, that's a huge loss. If Pickens out, it's still a huge loss. But I still think there's something inside me that the Steelers can find a way to gut one out and grind one out and beat the Ravens, even on the road. I mean, Kenny Pickett did it in prime time. I think who was that? It was Steven Sims. He threw the
Yeah.
dart over the middle to Steven Sims to beat them on Sunday Night Football that one year. Like, just crazy fluky things have happened over the last few years when we played the Ravens that have allowed them to win. So I think, I mean, I'm still going with the Steelers. Like, regardless, I think it's going to be like 17-13 or like 16-10 or something stupid like that. But I think the Steelers are just going to find a way to get it done. They've found a way to contain Jackson and just beat this team. And I think they're going to find a way to do it again this week and win the division. It's obviously something that means a lot to Tomlin, and I think they'll get it done.
All right, moving on. We're going to just do our listener question real quick here and wrap up the show. This one's from Brett from San Angelo. Brett, thank you for calling again. If you want to have your question answered, 412-254-3145. Give us a call, leave a voicemail, or you can text the line, and we will answer your question on a future episode. Here we go.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett Nile from San Angelo. And my question is kind of two-part. One, beginning of the year, it sure looked like Jackson and Porter were going to be the next pair of shutdown corners for the Steelers. So it looks like, to me, their play has dropped off over the last month to 6 weeks. My question to you is, has their play dropped off? Are people attacking them differently, or is the Steelers scheming them differently to explain why they have not looked nearly as good in recent weeks? Second question. Jackson has not finished at least the last two, and I think the last 3 games. Is it time to sit Jackson and give him a week or two to recover, especially with this 3 games in 11 days, to try to get him healthy for the playoffs?
All right, Brett, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think everyone kind of thought, I was pretty high on Donte Jackson. I don't think that many people were very high on him. I think he quickly, especially early on in the season, turned a lot of heads and had a lot of people thinking, wow, the corners are going to be one of the big strengths of this team. Obviously, everybody was high on Joey Porter after what kind of rookie season he had. Porter has had kind of a Jekyll and Hyde season, and Jackson has fallen off as of late. I think a lot of that might have to do with injury. Joe, what do you think? Do you think they should sit Jackson to try and get him healthy? And why do you think the corners are struggling so much?
Yeah, with Jackson, I guess the back has been the last 2 games, but for the most part, he's kind of just had a myriad of injuries this season. So I don't really know if sitting him is going to do a whole lot to get better. I think he's just maybe just a guy that kind of gets hurt a lot. I mean, he's gotten hurt a few times this season, came back like 6 plays later. So I wouldn't sit him. I still think you need him as a number 2 corner to get what you can out of him. Porter, just the penalties, I think has been the big issue. Jackson, I think he's kind of, just came back to the mean a little bit. He was playing really good football this earlier. I don't think he's playing bad football now. He's just not playing as good. And yeah, struggled a little bit. Probably been, slightly below average over these last few weeks. Nothing special. And then, yeah, Porter struggled against AJ Brown, but a lot of guys struggled against AJ Brown. So I'm not too concerned about at least Porter. Jackson, I think he's fine. He's serviceable. So I wouldn't panic too much about the two of them going forward, or at least the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would like to see more Trice. I know he only played in 3 games and basically just 2 games, and really just 1 game against the Broncos. He played, I think, 20 snaps, and he only played 1 snap against the Chargers before getting hurt on defense there. I would like to see Trice get ramped up. I understand why they are not playing him, just because he's inexperienced for the most part, but they need to start getting him ramped up because Jackson hasn't proven that he can stay healthy. I think it's time to start giving Trice a helmet so that he can get ramped up. So in the event in the playoffs that they get down to a situation where Jackson is hurt, or, God forbid, Porter gets hurt, and that would be a kind of a disaster, at least they have Trice because, James Pierre is the only depth corner right now. Sutton, you can maybe, move him around, but outside corner is probably the worst spot you could put him. So yeah, it is a concern. I don't know exactly what's happening. I think health is part of it. Joey Porter has some growth issues in terms of the penalties. The one kind of bright spot is the fact that he didn't have a penalty in this last game, though he did, maybe because he was being less physical, let up more to AJ Brown. So good question, Brett. I think it's a wait and see. I think I'm not concerned. Porter will be fine in the long run. I believe that. But Jackson, I don't think you can re-sign him at this point. just given he has an extensive injury history, and he's shown that again this year. So hope that answers your question. Again, if you guys want to have a question answered, 412-254-3145. This is the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle. That's Joe Clark, and we will catch you guys next week.